The village of Sutton in the Isle sits proudly above the surrounding farmland, a reflection of how it was first settled as an island in the boggy marshes of the medieval fenlands. Mentioned in the Domesday Book and notably prosperous from the 15th century, today Sutton remains a significant Cambridgeshire village, identified by planners as suitable for and in need of further new homes. On land nestling to the southeast of the centre of Sutton, Endurance Estates are proposing a residential development of 60 new homes. Firstly, landscape architects were asked to examine how such a scheme might affect the surrounding countryside.
When we talk about landscape-led schemes, it's rather than having a development imposed on the landscape, it's about understanding the landscape, understanding the context of the landscape, understanding what's sensitive within the landscape and working with those features, retaining them where possible and enhancing them where you can to deliver a scheme that is landscape-led and fits and is assimilated with its context and its surroundings. Ultimately, it delivers a better place for people to enjoy and live in.
Through public consultation, the developers have been keen to canvass public opinion. One of the key questions asked by local residents is what effect the new houses might have on the historic setting and views of Sutton's conservation area and church.
The benefit of the site is that it's actually got a considerable slope from top to bottom, and also some mature trees around the south extent of the site, which means that actually from your distance views, looking across to the church, you might just get a little ripple of some of the higher rooftops, but actually a lot of the views are protected by the natural levels and the trees. And then from the views from the church and out of the conservation area, you've actually got a screening of the listed buildings and the structures and the houses along the high street. So actually there's very little glimpses of the site as you look from within the conservation area. So it's naturally quite well screened and protected.
The developers have also sought the help of heritage experts to minimise any impact on the historic buildings of Sutton.
Sutton is a fantastically interesting historic village. It's got buildings that date from the late medieval, post-medieval and Georgian period, so architecturally it's quite fascinating. So my job as a historic buildings advisor is to advise as to best how to minimise change in the surroundings or the settings of the Grade 1 listed church of St Andrew and the 2 Grade 2 listed buildings, Rathmore and Rectory Farmhouse. So this can involve advising to lower building heights, change the orientation of buildings within the proposed development, the type of materials, so that they better reflect the historic character of the Sutton Conservation Area and the listed buildings and historic buildings within.
Some concerns about the planned new homes have been expressed by the immediate neighbours of the site.
I mean, we're very mindful that along the west of the site there are a whole series of bungalows. From day one we knew that was a major consideration to make sure that we worked as sensitively as we could with them. So, and that was from the whole team and the client, everybody and the landowner, everybody was in agreement on that. So what we've done is we've offset the houses and from those neighbours well beyond the minimum, and that was always a requirement. So we've gone beyond the kind of 10-metre gardens that would be the minimum. We're probably going to be up near a 15-metre length of gardens for the new houses. When we did the public exhibition, we were looking at houses that were potentially 2 stories plus some accommodation in the roof, and we reviewed and revisited that, and we've made sure that particularly adjacent to the bungalows, we've reduced it by a whole floor after the public consultations.
Another concern raised by local people was a likely increase in traffic emerging from Lawn Lane onto the High Street. Highways consultant Nigel Pettit has been examining this issue.
There's been a number of concerns from residents about the safety of this junction, specifically relating to the visibility. If you look left and right, there are buildings that limit the visibility somewhat. Now, whilst the development itself will not have a direct impact on limiting visibility, the developer would like to contribute towards improving the visibility, the footway width and the manoeuvrability around this junction.
The developers are proposing to improve safety at this junction by extending the pavement. There have also been concerns expressed that the additional new homes will cause an increase in traffic that the High Street, at its narrowest points, cannot sustain. This issue has also been examined by the Highways team.
So following the public exhibition, we have gone back out onto site, we've taken some measurements, we've reanalysed our data, we've looked back at our proposals, and whilst we've listened to the concerns raised by residents, we're confident that the width of the High Street along the majority of its route is wide enough to accommodate passing vehicles, and overall the development itself will have a negligible impact.
Established formulae indicate the traffic from the new homes will be no more than one vehicle every 2 minutes at peak times. The development may not have an impact on local roads, but what about the wild residents already on the site itself? The southern extremity of the site is home to a colony of great crested newts, and ecologist Dr. Duncan has been monitoring the site, looking at any potential risks to the newts and their environment.
So what we have, what was caught overnight, are 5 adult great crested newts. I think we have 3 females and 2 males. This is a female great crested newt. I suspect it's recently arrived in the pond to breed, to mate with the males and then lay eggs on the submerged aquatic plants. All great crested newts have a very unique it's like a fingerprint, a belly pattern. This is a newt that has spent most of its winter in the surrounding scrub. They move to the ponds in the spring to mate. The pond itself is a very good pond for great crested newts, largely because it's being kept open and unshaded by the cattle that come down and graze the brambles. So as a consequence of that, we get a lot of abundance of aquatic plants, which gives the adult newts plenty of places to lay their eggs, and there are microinvertebrates and algae on the aquatic plants that the young newts will then feed on. So it's a very good pond for great crested newts in that context. If the pond is left neglected or the cattle disappear, it will gradually silt up, it will gradually become very shaded, and the pond we have over there is at that later stage of cirral development. So it's much shallower, it's more shaded, and there are very few aquatic plants, and consequently we don't have many great crested newts using it. But we now have the opportunity with the development to actually have money and a legal obligation set aside to manage this whole area behind me for great crested newts as a great crested newt nature reserve. So overall the picture is, I think, a very positive one for great crested newts if this development were to go ahead, because there will be this legal obligation for the developers to ensure the needs of great crested newts as well as the residents are met.
Someone else responsible for surveying levels of water on the site is drainage engineer Åsa Söderberg. Her brief is to ensure the natural drainage of the site is maintained after the construction of the new homes.
I'm a civil engineer specialising in flood risk and drainage. I visit the site and do a site walkover where I assess how the site is draining naturally. The site naturally drains to this ditch that captures the runoff and any overland flow. The site is outside the floodplain, but they have small areas which is at risk of surface water flooding, mainly due to the small depressions on the site, and that is purely because the site is underlain by clay, so the water has got nowhere to go, so it sits on the surface. As part of the development with the new drainage system, all that rainwater will be captured into the drainage system. The neighbours have had issues in the past of their gardens flooding, and the development will actually make that better by intercepting the runoff. So the water will be captured into our drainage system rather than causing flooding to the back of their gardens. There has been some local foul flooding issues in the area, and that's a concern of the locals. That is not due to a capacity issue, but there have been issues in the existing pumping station where it's been blocked. Anglian Water has assured us that there is adequate capacity within the pumping station for the new development discharging to the existing pumping station.
There are also local concerns that additional housing will put greater demand on the local schools and doctors' surgery, but there are legal provisions to ensure this is not a problem.
New housing development does create the demand for additional service provision in the form of school places at the local primary school, capacity at the doctors, local park provision and so forth. Housing developers are routinely required to either pay for that expansion in services or to physically provide the facilities needed by their growth.
Planners recognise Sutton as a large sustainable village with facilities that could accommodate additional growth. Several comments from residents reflect the desire for more homes for local people.
The prime benefit to a local resident is that it brings new housing to Sutton, and I think everyone would acknowledge that all the settlements, or most of the key settlements in East Cambridgeshire, need new housing. So they will have family, relatives and so forth that are looking to stay in the area and possibly in new housing. More importantly, it brings 30% of affordable housing, so that will be subsidised social housing for those in need, and possibly small starter homes for first-time buyers. That's not necessarily available in the village today.